The night's rain poured down on New York City, as if it meant to wash everything away. Torrents of water lashed against car windows, blurring the already crowded streets, as if all of Manhattan were submerged in a cold gray painting. The blare of car horns, the splash of water against the sidewalks, and the neon lights reflecting off puddles created a chaotic, suffocating symphony. Emma Ramirez gripped the steering wheel of her old Toyota Corolla, which she jokingly called her loyal friend Betsy. The windshield wipers squeaked incessantly, struggling against the relentless downpour, but barely making a difference. The dim yellow glow of streetlights spilled onto the water-streaked windshield, forcing Emma to squint to see the road ahead. "Come on, Betsy. Don't give up on me now," Emma muttered, sighing, as she patted the steering wheel, as if encouraging an old friend. In the trunk, a few worn sketchbooks rattled with every pothole. Those pages were all that remained of the fashion dreams Emma had once chased before life forced her to set them aside for reality. At 24, Emma carried burdens heavier than most her age. Her parents had died in a car accident, leaving her and her younger brother Jake. Jake was now a medical student, the family's only hope. Emma worked grueling shifts at a small diner, pulling day and night hours to pay for his tuition and keep their tiny Queens apartment from slipping away. Her dream of designing the spark that once lit up her youth now survived only in the scribbled pencil strokes on those pages. After an exhausting shift tonight, Emma wanted nothing more than to get home, shower, and collapse into bed. But fate had other plans, a meeting she never could have anticipated. As her car idled at a Fifth Avenue intersection, Emma shivered. Amid the torrential rain, a solitary figure stood on the sidewalk under the flickering streetlight. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, without an umbrella, his dress shirt and suit jacket soaked through, clinging to him like a second skin. Strangest of all, he made no effort to seek shelter, standing upright, his gaze fixed on the gray, churning sky. Emma's heart tightened. She knew stopping in the middle of the night to talk to a stranger in New York was dangerous. Yet something about the man's defiant, lonely stance made it impossible for her to drive away. Drawn by an invisible force, Emma rolled down her window and shouted over the roar of the rain, "Hey, want a ride?" The man turned. In the dim light, Emma caught sight of his deep ashen gray eyes, cold, but carrying an unnameable sadness. He stood silent for a few seconds, as if weighing his options. Then a low, gravelly voice cut through the rain. "You sure?" Emma shrugged, trying to seem nonchalant. "Unless you want to keep showering out there for a few more hours." For a moment, the corner of his mouth twitched into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. He stepped toward the car, opened the door, and in an instant, the scent of expensive cologne mixed with damp rain filled the cramped space of Betsy. Emma felt a twinge of awkwardness. Even drenched, this man exuded a distinct aura. His tailored suit and intricate wristwatch were clearly worth a fortune. She swallowed hard, turned the key, and the car lurched through the slick streets. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady but warm. "I'm Brian Green." Emma nodded slightly, her eyes fixed on the slippery road ahead. Emma Ramirez. For a brief moment they fell into silence. Only the rhythm of rain tapping the roof and the old engine's hum filled the space. But it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. On the contrary, Emma felt an odd calm settle in, as if the man beside her carried a separate world amid the chaos outside. "Where are you headed?" Emma asked, breaking the quiet. "The Green Building," Brian replied curtly. Emma started. The Green Building wasn't that one of Manhattan's most iconic skyscrapers. She'd passed it before, gazing up at it with distant awe. Yet this man had mentioned it so casually. She stole a glance at him. Brian sat upright, staring ahead, his handsome face chiseled. But beneath the polished exterior was something weary. Not the exhaustion of being soaked, but a more profound, long-carried fatigue. "Why were you standing in the rain like that?" Emma couldn't help but ask. Brian was quiet for a long time. Finally, he let out a breath, his voice low. "Sometimes you need to feel alive, even if it's just the sting of rain on your skin." His words struck Emma silent. She knew that feeling, the need to find something, anything, to remind herself she was still here, still feeling. For a fleeting moment, two people from seemingly different worlds found common ground. The streets grew quieter, with only the golden glow of streetlights reflecting off the wet pavement. A few blocks later, the green building loomed into view, massive, majestic, lighting up the night sky. Emma bit her lip, suddenly aware of the vast distance between them. As the car stopped at the entrance, Brian turned to her. His gray eyes, though cold, flickered with a rare warmth. "Thank you, Emma Ramirez. Most people wouldn't have stopped. I just thought, if we're all stuck in a storm, we might as well help each other through," Emma replied, a little flustered under his steady gaze. Brian nodded, as if committing her words to memory. He stepped out, but paused before leaving. "I owe you one, and someday I'll repay it." Then he strode into the gleaming building, leaving Emma in the car, her heart racing. Before she could process it, the revolving glass doors swallowed his tall figure. In that moment, Emma had no idea that a small decision, stopping in the rain to offer a stranger a ride, would change her life in ways even her boldest dreams couldn't imagine. The New York sky, the morning after the rain, was obvious, as if the entire city had been washed anew. But that clarity did nothing to lift the gloom in Brian Green's mind. He sat alone in his office on the top floor of the Green Building, where massive glass walls revealed a sweeping view of Manhattan below. The streets still shimmered with puddles reflecting golden sunlight, but to him, they were merely lifeless lines in a familiar painting. Neatly stacked files for the latest merger awaited his signature on his desk. His assistant had sent reminder emails, and the board was expecting a decision. A single signature would expand the company into a new sector, adding billions to its profits. Yet Brian left the pen untouched, his hand hesitating each time he reached for it. Instead of reviewing numbers, his gaze lingered on the window, replaying the face of the woman who had stopped her car in the rain. Emma's earnest look, her calm voice speaking of helping each other through the storm, was like foreign fragments slipping into a life dominated by strategy, money, and power. A knock at the door pulled Brian back to reality. "Mr. Green, the press is waiting downstairs. They want your statement on the Parker deal." Brian raised an eyebrow, his icy gaze returning. "Tell them to wait, or cancel the press conference." His assistant froze, then nodded and retreated, a flicker of confusion in their eyes. When the door closed, Brian stood and walked to the small bar in the corner. Instead of pouring his usual whiskey, he reached for a glass of water, a simple act, but rare. Perhaps he needed something clearer, something to echo the uncalculated moment in that old car last night. Meanwhile, across the city, Emma woke to the shrill ring of her chipped-edge phone. Her tiny Queens apartment barely had room for a bed, a desk, and a few wooden shelves crammed with Jake's medical textbooks. A stack of overdue bills glared red on the kitchen counter, a daily weight on her shoulders. Emma lit the stove, boiling water for instant coffee. The cheap coffee's aroma mingled with the smell of damp laundry she hadn't had time to wash. She sat sipping the bitter brew, trying to shake off her fatigue. "You stayed up late again, didn't you?" Jake poked his head out from his room, voice still thick with sleep. Emma forced a smile. "Don't worry about it. Focus on your exams." She quickly hid the half-open sketchbook under an old newspaper. The unfinished lines of an evening gown lay incomplete. Long ago, she'd learned to bury her dreams, fearing that exposing them would only make them feel more distant and painful. Jake sat across from her, his eyes filled with concern. "You can't keep pushing your dreams aside, Em." "You," Emma cut him off, raising a hand. "Stop. I'm fine." But deep down, she knew she wasn't. In the quiet hours after late shifts when the city slept, she sat under a dim desk lamp sketching dresses she'd never have the chance to create. Brian faced a starkly different world on the other side of the city. The grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria glittered with crystal chandeliers. Men and women in lavish attire laughed, clinked glasses, and discussed investments and influence. All eyes turned to Brian as he entered. "Mr. Green, have you decided on the merger? Is it true you're expanding into media? Mr. Green, we hope you'll attend next week's auction." The questions came relentlessly, paired with polite smiles and outstretched hands. Brian wasn't a person to everyone here. He was a walking vault. He offered a strained smile, gave curt responses, and slipped out to the balcony for a breath of real air. The night breeze brushed his face, carrying the lingering dampness of the rain. Emma's voice echoed again in that moment. "If we're all stuck in a storm, we might as well help each other through." Such a simple sentiment, yet so alien to Brian. In his world, no one helped without calculating the gain. But Emma had without a trace of ulterior motive. Meanwhile, Emma returned to the familiar rhythm of her diner uniform. The clatter of dishes, the clamor of customers calling orders, her hands swiftly pouring coffee and carrying trays. It was a monotonous loop, the only path she had to pay rent and keep Jake in school. During a brief break, she sat in the corner of the storage room, flipping open her sketchbook. Hasty pencil strokes formed wedding gowns, evening dresses, and women's blazers. Closing her eyes, she pictured a dazzling runway, her designs worn by models under bright lights. For a moment, she let herself dream. The manager's voice snapped her back. "Emma Table, 7's calling for you." She shut the sketchbook, stuffed it into her apron, and returned to work. Two people wrestled with their thoughts that night in their separate corners of the city. In his luxurious penthouse, Brian sat before a glass of amber liquor he didn't touch, staring out a massive window. Emma, in her dim apartment, clutched her sketchbook like a treasure. Two worlds, one impossibly opulent, the other painfully simple. Both empty, both yearning for something real. And neither knew that after one chance encounter, their parallel paths were about to intersect, changing everything. Soft music filled the elegant ballroom, where a symphony orchestra played beneath dazzling crystal chandeliers. The Green Foundation's annual charity gala drew New York's elite. Shimmering evening gowns, impeccably tailored tuxedos, and polite smiles mingled with the clink of glasses, painting a picture of opulence tinged with cold detachment. Emma stood backstage with a silver tray in hand, her eyes scanning the crowd quietly. It wasn't her first time working at a high-profile event, but the feeling of being an outsider still weighed heavily on her heart. She moved deftly through the throng, pouring drinks, offering courteous smiles, then retreating into the shadows, as if she'd never been there. Brian Green stood composed amid flashing cameras and admiring glances in a corner of the room. He shook hands with politicians, exchanged words with investors, but his eyes remained distant. Unnoticed by others, his gaze drifted toward the service area whenever he broke free from the crowd, where a familiar figure moved silently. When a female guest accidentally dropped her purse, Emma quickly bent to retrieve it. At that moment, a small notebook slipped from her apron and fell to the floor. Its pages revealed intricate sketches, an evening gown with a plunging neckline, a flowing layered skirt, and delicate lace details. The woman gasped in surprise. "Who designed this, Emma?" Hurriedly picked it up, her face flushing. "Just some random sketches, ma'am." But before she could close it, another hand reached down. Brian. He lifted the notebook, his ashen gray eyes locking onto the page. The usual coldness in his gaze softened, replaced by rare focus. "These aren't random. he said quietly, just loud enough for Emma to hear. "This is design, and it's beautiful." Emma awkwardly reached for the notebook, but Brian didn't hand it back right away. He flipped through a few more pages. Each sketch radiated creativity and aesthetic sensibility. Elegant classic dresses with modern flair women's blazers, both bold and refined. He frowned slightly, as if seeing something precious overlooked by others. "You don't have to do that," Emma whispered, worried others might notice. "It's just a hobby." "A hobby?" Brian gave a faint smile, returning the notebook. "People with hobbies don't create work like this. This is talent, Emma." Her name, spoken warm yet firm, made her heart skip. Flustered Emma tucked the notebook away, avoiding his gaze. Later, as the gala wound down, Brian quietly sought out the backstage area where Emma was clearing trays. He stood there tall and silent in the dim light, startling her when she looked up. "Why do you hide it?" he asked, cutting straight to the point. Emma hesitated. "Because it's worthless in my life right now. I work to pay rent, support my brother, and cover bills. Who cares about a sketchbook when I can't afford to turn it into real clothes?" Brian went, still his eyes flickering. Her words struck a hidden chord he knew too well, the feeling of trading what you truly desire for the cold weight of responsibility. "You're wrong," he said softly. "Its value lies in its existence. Talent doesn't need money to be worth preserving." Emma gave a faint, trembling laugh. "Words like that come easy when you're standing in a tailored suit in a world I'll never belong to." Her words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Brian wanted to argue but realized she was right. The gap between them was painfully clear. Another staff member called for Emma, cutting their conversation short. She turned away, leaving Brian alone in the backstage shadows, haunted by a question. Why did a woman with such dreaming eyes feel she had no right to dream? After that night, Emma's sketchbook lingered in Brian's mind. Amid endless meetings, reports, and plans, he kept seeing those graceful lines on paper, not just for their beauty, but for the rare honesty they reflected, someone driven by inspiration, not calculation. He instructed his assistant to compile a report on promising young designers in the city, but stopped short of including Emma's name. He knew that if his corporate machine touched her dream, it would become a business project, stripped of its purity. Meanwhile, Emma returned to the diner the next day, her mind in turmoil. Maria, an older coworker, noticed. "What's wrong, Anita? You look lost." Emma shook her head, but her heart churned. She couldn't forget when Brian Greene held her sketchbook and called it talent. A man of his stature had no reason to care about her anonymous sketches, yet he had Ernest. That night, back in her apartment, Emma opened her sketchbook under the yellow glow of a lamp. She drew a new design with trembling but determined hands for the first time in years, a pristine white gown with sharp cuts and a flowing train. She told herself that even if she couldn't make it real, she still had the right to dream. Across the city, Brian sat alone in his office. He glanced at his phone, pausing at a contact he'd obtained from the event organizer. A thought stirred: call Emma or stay silent. He closed his eyes, picturing the spark in her eyes as she defended her sketchbook. Something urged him forward. The first time in years, he wanted to connect with someone not for business or gain, but for their authenticity. His finger hovered over the call button, then pulled back. Not yet. Leaning back in his chair, Brian stared out the vast window. He knew the path ahead would no longer be simple once this secret was uncovered. Emma Ramirez wasn't just the woman who gave him a ride in the rain. She was becoming the center of something far greater than either could foresee. The small Queen's apartment was silent in the night. A stack of bills sat starkly on the table, a relentless reminder of reality. Emma hunched over a desk lamp, her hand tirelessly sketching. The scratch of a pencil against dry paper filled the air. But in her mind, a universe of shimmering colors, lights, and an imagined catwalk came alive. After a while, her fingers ached. Emma set the pencil down, taking a deep breath. Her sketchbook had grown thicker, but the fleeting joy was quickly overtaken by doubt. What's the point of beauty if no one sees it? She smiled bitterly, closed the notebook and tucked it into a wooden drawer. Across town, Brian Greene sat in his marble-lined office. Spread before him were files on investment deals, but his mind wandered elsewhere. He kept thinking of the small notebook in Emma's hands that night, the sketches that had made him pause. On his desk, amid scattered papers, lay a crumpled napkin. He'd found it last night after the gala left behind in the service area. On it were unfinished sketches, a cocktail dress fitted at the waist with a gently flared skirt. Just a few simple lines, but he saw life in every stroke. He smoothed the napkin on the glass desk, his fingers tracing the lines. He couldn't recall the last time he'd cared about something unrelated to profit or power. He was certain Emma hadn't meant to leave it, let alone thought anyone would value it. But to him, it was a clue to her true self. Brian sat up and pressed the intercom for his assistant. Compile a list of artisanal tailors in the city. I want to meet a few veteran craftsmen privately. Sir, for what purpose? Just do it. Brian cut in a glint of determination in his eyes. He didn't elaborate. He wasn't sure what he'd do yet, only that he couldn't let those sketches stay buried in a dusty drawer. That evening, Emma worked another shift at the diner. It was late with customers thinning out, but she stayed busy cleaning. As she wiped down a table, a familiar low voice broke through. 1 black coffee. Emma looked up startled. Brian Greene sat there immaculate in a dark suit, as if the diner's dim lights couldn't contain his presence. What are you doing here? She asked, surprised yet wary. Brian met her gaze calmly. I hear this place serves good coffee. Emma frowned slightly, knowing he wasn't the type to frequent a cheap diner. But she didn't press silently, bringing him the coffee. As she set the cup down, she noticed his eyes never left her. About those sketches the other night, Brian began. Emma cut him off. Don't. I don't want to talk about it. Why not? He tilted his head. Your talent deserves to be acknowledged. Talent doesn't pay the rent. She replied curtly, her eyes tinged with sadness. Brian fell silent, not pushing further. He sipped the coffee, wincing slightly at its bitterness. But instead of dropping the subject, he smiled faintly, as if her words only fueled his resolve. Days later, after a late shift, Emma found a small package at her apartment door. Inside were high-quality colored pencils and smooth, thick drawing paper. A brief note attached, Don't bury your dreams because of reality. B. Emma clutched the note, her heart racing. She knew instantly who sent it, torn between keeping it and throwing it away. She hated the idea of pity, but as her fingers brushed the paper's smooth surface, her eyes glistened. How long had it been since she'd drawn on anything decent instead of old receipts or napkins? That night, she opened a fresh page and tested the pencils. Colors bloomed vividly, more alive than ever. Though she didn't want to admit it, the gift sparked a fragile belief. Meanwhile, in his office, Brian received a report. His assistant had arranged a meeting with veteran tailors who'd worked for major fashion houses. He nodded, but a different plan was forming in his mind. He didn't want to turn Emma into a commercial project. He wanted her to see that her work could live beyond the page. Brian flipped through files one evening in his penthouse, pausing at a few of Emma's sketches he'd collected. He sat for a long time, imagining them as real dresses. The more he thought, the stronger his urge to make it happen. Emma, meanwhile, tried to ignore Brian's recurring presence. Yet, strangely, she kept crossing paths with him, at another fundraiser in a business magazine, even at the diner. He appeared when she least expected him. Emma found a folded paper in her apron pocket one night after her shift. Unfolding it, she saw a wedding dress sketch hers, but refined sharper, as if someone had studied it closely and added details. Below was a note, "Most beautiful when seen." Emma bit her lip, tears welling up. She was both angry and touched angry that he dared meddle with her guarded dream, and felt that he was the first to see it and not dismiss it. That night, she forgot her sketchbook on the diner's bar counter. When she realized and rushed back, the place was closed. But the next morning, it was neatly placed on a table beside a high-end drawing pen. A bold handwritten note on the last page. "Let yourself shine, Emma." She flipped through the pages, trembling, noticing some sketches had been outlined in another hand. Brian's, no doubt. He hadn't altered them, only highlighted them to stand out, as if saying, "I see you. I recognize you." Emma clutched the sketchbook to her chest, her heart pounding. She didn't know what to call this feeling, gratitude, confusion, or fear. But one thing was clear. Her sketches were no longer forgotten from this moment, and that realization set her entire world trembling. On a Friday evening, New York glowed with vibrant lights, its bustling downtown streets, packed with people and cars. Emma stood before a mirror in her small apartment, studying the simple black dress she'd slipped on. It wasn't new or worn, but made her feel polished and composed. Her hands trembled slightly as she applied a touch of lipstick, then stepped back, taking a deep breath. Her phone screen still glowed with the message, "I'll pick you up at 8. B." Emma wasn't sure she should go. Her rational side warned of risks, but her racing heart urged her to step forward. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Jake poked his head in, squinting at his sister. "I've never seen you fuss in front of the mirror this long." Emma laughed, masking her unease. "Don't talk too much, or you'll be late for your study group." Jake stepped closer, eyeing her intently. "You sure about this guy?" Emma hesitated, but before she could answer, the doorbell rang. Opening the door, she saw Brian Greene standing there. Instead of his usual sleek suit, he wore a dark shirt and a long coat, exuding elegance, yet a newfound approachability. When his eyes met hers, a rare smile softened his typically stoic face. "You look stunning," he said, but the warmth in his tone sent Emma's heart racing. They left the noisy neighborhood in a sleek black sedan with Brian behind the wheel. Emma raised an eyebrow. "I thought you always had a driver." "Sometimes driving myself feels freer," he replied, eyes fixed on the road. "Besides, tonight, I want things to be private." The car glided over glowing bridges, leaving the city's clamor behind. They stopped at a quiet street by the river in front of a cozy little restaurant, with warm light spilling from its windows. No flashing cameras, no whispers from high society. Inside, Emma was surprised. She'd imagined Brian would take her somewhere extravagant, but instead, he'd chosen a family-run Italian restaurant, where an elderly owner personally served steaming plates of pasta. Brian explained that this is where I come to escape the noise, catching her surprised look. "No one here cares who I am." Emma smiled faintly. "And me? What will they think seeing me with you?" "They'll think I'm lucky." He set his gaze steady on her face. For a moment, Emma looked away, hiding the flush creeping up her cheeks. Dinner passed in a gentle atmosphere. Gone were the formalities. Brian asked about her childhood's small joys, things she'd never shared with anyone. Emma hesitated, then opened up, talking about hours spent by the window, dreaming of becoming a designer, and the ache of setting it aside for her family. Brian listened to every word, his eyes lighting up whenever she mentioned her passion. "Do you realize how your eyes shine when you talk about fashion?" he asked softly. "That's why I believe you were born to pursue it." His candor took Emma aback. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not with such sincerity in their eyes. After dinner, Brian took her to an unexpected place, a rooftop garden on an old riverside building. Warm golden lights wove through climbing vines, and the faint scent of jasmine floated in the breeze. The city sparkled in the distance, but the rooftop felt like a separate world. Emma strolled awed by the romantic beauty. "How did you find this place?" "An old friend showed me," Brian said. "But I've never brought anyone here until now." Emma turned to him, her heart tightening. His faint smile hinted at something more profound. She suddenly wanted to know more about the man before her. "Brian." She said his name for the first time, trembling slightly. "Why were you standing in the rain that night?" His gaze stilled. After a long pause, he exhaled slowly, as if weighing whether to open up. Finally, he spoke quietly. "Because I'd stopped feeling anything. My life was so whole that it made me lose the ability to tell what's real from what's fake. I needed the rain to know I was still alive." Emma fell silent. His words gripped her heart. She knew that feeling, being invisible in the flow of life. She stepped closer, her eyes bright under the lights. And now Brian looked deep into her eyes, his voice low and rough. "Now I know I can still feel because of you." The distance between them closed. Without another word, Brian leaned down. Their first kiss was gentle, trembling, yet fervent, confirming that they'd crossed the line from strangers to something closer. After that night, the walls between them crumbled. Phone calls became routine, sometimes just brief exchanges. "Have you eaten?" Or "How's your day?" But enough to make Emma smile through her shifts. Accustomed to closed-door meetings and cold contracts, Brian felt warmth stir when Emma shared stories of a demanding diner customer or her small joy at finding cheap fabric. For Emma, each message from him brought both happiness and fear. Happiness from his simple, profound care. Fear because the gap between their worlds remained. She wasn't sure she dared to step into his world fully. As Emma sketched in her apartment one late evening, her phone rang. Brian's warm, earnest voice came through. "Emma, I don't know what the future holds, but I want you to know you've changed how I see the world." She held her breath. "What do you mean I don't see meaningless numbers or contracts anymore?" "I'm starting to see beauty in the small things because you dare to live true to your passion." Emma smiled, tears spilling over. In that moment, she knew her heart had stirred undeniably. The city roared on, but Emma felt a rare peace in her small apartment. She touched her sketchbook, whispering, "Maybe this time. I'm not just drawing for dreams. I'm drawing for my heart." The atmosphere in the Plaza Hotel's ballroom was breathtakingly grand. Crystal chandeliers cast light over hundreds of guests in extravagant attire. Tonight's charity gala, hosted by a prestigious organization, drew the city's most powerful figures. When Brian Greene entered, all eyes turned to him and Emma at his side, wearing a simple navy dress. She'd tailored herself to fit perfectly. At first, Emma managed to smile, listening to polite introductions. But as the night wore on, she felt the weight of scrutinizing stares. Whispers floated around her. Some women scanned her from head to toe, while certain men regarded her with dismissive smirks. "Who is she? I heard she works at a small diner. Since when does Brian go for someone so ordinary?" The snippets of conversation cut into Emma like knives. She tried to ignore them, but her palms grew clammy. The tension peaked when a woman approached, resplendent in a fiery red Chanel gown. She set her champagne glass on a waiter's tray and turned to Brian. It's been a while, Brian. Emma stepped back slightly, but the woman's eyes flicked to her, her smile laced with intent. And this is your new companion. Brian gently squeezed Emma's hand, his voice calm but firm. This is Emma Ramirez. The woman raised an eyebrow, her tone sugary yet sharp. Oh, how touching. A real-life movie plot, the billionaire and the typical girl. But Brian, don't you think you're being a bit too charitable? The words hit Emma like a slap. She turned away, swallowing hard. Brian's eyes flashed with cold anger as he replied, Victoria, I don't recall asking for your opinion on my choices. The woman shrugged, smirked, and walked off, leaving Emma trembling. On the drive home, the air in the car was heavy. Emma stared out the window, the city's glittering lights suddenly feeling distant. You okay? Brian asked. Okay. Emma let out a strained laugh. Did you hear what they said? Brian gripped the steering wheel tightly. They don't matter. But you know they do. That's your world where every whisper is a weapon. I'm an excuse for them to mock you. Brian pulled the car to the curb and turned to her, his gaze resolute. Listen to me, Emma. They can say whatever they want, but it doesn't change what's real between us. Emma shook her head, her voice breaking. You might handle it, but I can't. I'm not used to being looked down on like that. Brian touched her cheek, his voice softening. Then, let me shield you. Emma's eyes welled up. She wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her. Days later, the press erupted. Brian Greene was secretly dating an unknown woman. Paparazzi photos from the gala flooded the internet. Vicious comments poured in on social media. An obvious gold digger. Just another rich man's amusement. When will he wake up? In her small apartment. Emma's phone buzzed incessantly with notifications. She turned it off, tossed it onto the couch, and buried her face in her hands. Jake emerged, seeing his sister's hollow expression, and touched her shoulder. You don't need to read that stuff. But it's out there. Jake, Emma said hoarsely. They've turned me into a joke. Jake fell silent, knowing he couldn't stop the storm of public opinion. Meanwhile, in his office, Brian faced immense pressure. The board hinted at concerns over the company's image, and partners called with thinly veiled worries. One was blunt. We need to work with someone focused on business, not someone drowning in a romantic scandal. Brian stayed quiet, his eyes flashing with anger. He'd never let anyone dictate his personal life, but when he thought of Emma, his heart sank. One afternoon, Emma received a text, I need to see you. B. They met at a small cafe near a park. Brian arrived, looking weary, but resolute. He placed a file in front of her. This is the PR plan my team drafted. They want me to announce a breakup to protect my image. Emma's eyes widened. And you're going to do it. Brian looked directly at her. No, I don't care about my image. I care about you. Emma choked up but shook her head. Brian, I can't let you sacrifice your career for me. It's not a sacrifice, he said firmly. You're my choice. Tears streamed down Emma's face. She wanted to believe him, but the whispers, the scornful looks, the vicious articles, they loomed like an insurmountable wall. Give me time, she said finally, her voice trembling. I need to think. Brian went still, but didn't stop her. He knew she was battling her own fears. That night, Emma lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Her mind replayed Victoria's biting words, the cruel online comments, and Brian's unwavering gaze. Her heart stirred, but her reason panicked. Was love strong enough to withstand a world that saw her as unworthy? Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window pane with urgent taps. Emma closed her eyes, whispering, "If this is the storm, do I have the courage to face it with him?" She didn't yet have an answer. After days suffocated by gossip, Emma decided she could no longer hide. She sat at her small desk in the apartment, opening her dusty sketchbook, her trembling hand gripping a pencil. Fear lingered, but a strange new energy surged within her. She refused to let others define her through their whispers. Jake emerged from the kitchen, surprised to see her working intently. "You're really drawing again?" Emma smiled, her eyes alight with resolve. "Not just drawing. I'm going to make it real." The next day, Emma visited Richard Patterson, the man who'd first given her a chance. She stepped into his grand office, adorned with classic paintings, and deeply breathed. "Mr. Patterson," she began, her voice steadier than ever, "could you introduce me to some contacts in the fashion industry? I don't want to stop at a wedding dress. I want to start truly." The older man studied her, his eyes mixed with surprise and approval. "I've been waiting for this day. You have talent, Emma. I'll connect you with some event organizers. But know this, stepping into that world won't be easy." Emma nodded, her grip tightening. "I'm ready." In the following days, Emma threw herself into work with unprecedented intensity. Her tiny apartment became a makeshift atelier. Fabric needles and mannequins crowded every corner. Many nights she stayed up, eyes ringed with exhaustion, but her heart burned with purpose. Maria, her old co-worker from the diner, stopped by and laughed at the chaotic scene. "My God, you look like a real designer." Emma looked up, her hair messy, but her smile was radiant because she wanted to be a real designer. Maria set a box of food on the table. "Then eat first. You design to make others beautiful, but you must take care of yourself too." Emma hugged her tightly. "Thank you, Maria. I'd have fallen apart without you." While Emma pushed forward, Brian watched quietly from a distance. He'd once wanted to help her with all his resources, but after their recent talk, he understood she needed her own victory. He sent only brief messages. "Don't forget to sleep enough," or "I believe in you." Nothing more. Reading them, Emma felt both warmth and guilt, but she stayed firm. Love could only last if both had their own worth to take pride in. Emma was invited to a fashion showcase for young designers a month later. It wasn't a global event, but it was a rare opportunity. Her hands shook as she held the invitation, her heart pounding. Jake hugged her excitedly. "This is when the world sees you." Emma smiled, but anxiety crept in. Failure would make her a laughingstock again. Success, however, could open a new path. As the showcase approached, her apartment buzzed with activity. Her designs took shape: a dress inspired by ocean waves, a bold women's suit, a cocktail dress celebrating freedom. Each piece carried her heart and her life story. Emma sat on the floor the night before the event, gazing at her lined-up creations. Her mind replayed the public's sneers, Victoria's jabs at the gala. But then Brian's voice cut through. "I believe in you." Emma closed her eyes, whispering, "Tomorrow, I'll prove them all wrong." The showcase took place in a Soho gallery, brightly lit with an audience of journalists, fashion bloggers, and small-scale investors. Backstage, Emma's hands were ice cold. When the first model stepped out in her shimmering blue dress inspired by rain, the room fell silent, then buzzed with murmurs of awe. One by one her collection appeared, and Emma watched the reactions with bated breath. A journalist whispered, "Who's this newcomer so unique?" An investor scribbled notes furiously. A blogger snapped photos non-stop. When the final model walked out in a minimalist white gown, its precise cuts glowing under the lights, the room erupted in applause. The sound overwhelmed Emma, her eyes blurring with tears. She'd done it. After the show, people approached her shaking hands, requesting business cards expressing admiration. A fashion magazine scheduled an interview and photo shoot. A small retailer offered a collaboration. Emma was nearly overwhelmed. Maria rushed over, enveloping her in a hug. "See, you didn't need anyone to shine," Emma cried, but they were tears of joy. Late that night, back in her apartment, Emma checked her phone. Amid dozens of messages, she paused at one name: Brian. "I watched the showcase via live stream. I've never seen you shine like that. Prouder of you than anything. B." Emma pressed the phone to her chest, tears falling freely. For the first time, she felt she wasn't just a shadow beside him, but a person with her worth, deserving of love. The next day, the press no longer called her Brian Greene's girlfriend, but rather the rising designer Emma Ramirez. Articles flooded with photos of her collection, praising her fresh, sophisticated style. Emma read each line, her heart soaring. She knew the road ahead would be tough, but she'd stood firm on her own 2 feet. That evening, as Jake slept, Emma stood alone on her small balcony. The city sparkled in the distance. She recalled everything: the diner, sleepless nights, sketching the scornful glances at the gala and the applause yesterday. A conviction echoed in her heart. No matter where her love for Brian led, she'd never return to the days of merely surviving. Emma smiled softly, whispering to the breeze, "This is me, and I'll keep moving forward." After the Soho showcase, Emma Ramirez's name spread like wildfire. Photos of her collection flooded social media, accompanied by articles praising the boldness and emotion in her designs. For Emma, it felt like a dream opening a new door. But every dream comes with challenges. One morning, Emma received a call from a renowned fashion magazine, inviting her for an exclusive photo shoot and interview. Her heart raced. This was the opportunity every young designer coveted. Emma felt thrilled and elated during the shoot, amid flashing lights and lavish compliments. But she overheard hushed remarks from the backstage crew. "She's only getting attention because she's dating Brian Greene. Without him, who'd care?" Emma bit her lip. Despite proving her talent, Brian's shadow still loomed over her. Meanwhile, Brian faced his own storm. Major shareholders pressured him, claiming his relationship with Emma tarnished the company's reputation. One spoke bluntly during a meeting: "Mr. Greene, we invested for profits, not tabloid stories about the chairman's personal life." Brian replied coldly, "My personal life isn't up for negotiation." But he knew the criticism wouldn't fade easily. Days later, Emma was invited to another event, a fundraiser for a significant scholarship foundation. She attended as a guest designer, this time not as Brian's companion. Still, her heart tightened as she stepped into the grand hall. The atmosphere was opulent, the guests elite, and predictably the familiar judgmental stares followed her. Emma wore a dress she'd designed herself, simple yet elegant. Brian stood by her like a steadfast wall, but she knew she had to hold her own. While speaking with journalists, Victoria, the woman who'd once openly mocked her, approached, dazzling in a shimmering gown, her smile sweet but her eyes icy. "Well, Emma Ramirez is a famous designer now. Are we? Quite the leap from a little diner. But tell me, do you ever wonder if you'd be here without Brian?" Emma replied calmly, her smile faint. "I don't deny Brian's support, but I'm here because of my sketches, sleepless nights, and tears you'll never know." Victoria faltered briefly but then smirked. "No matter what to this world, you're still an outsider. And one day Brian will remember where he belongs." Emma didn't respond, turning away. Victoria's words stoked the fire of unease within her. After the event, Emma and Brian sat in the car. The city glittered outside, but silence hung heavy. Finally, Emma spoke softly. "Do you ever regret choosing me?" Brian turned to her, his gaze piercing. "I only regret one thing. Emma's heart caught. What? That I didn't meet you sooner. His words brought tears to her eyes, but also deepened her fears. Their love was beautiful, but was it strong enough to withstand external forces? Days later, a new blow struck. An anonymous article accused Emma of plagiarizing designs from another designer, accompanied by images of two sketches with vague similarities. The media erupted. Many questioned Emma's talent, dismissing her as a fleeting phenomenon, propped up by her connection to Brian. Emma was devastated, her hands trembling as she held the newspaper. Jake fumed. This is clearly a setup. Maria was livid. They're jealous, Emma. Don't let them win. But Emma slumped at the table, the world spinning. Everything she'd built seemed on the verge of collapse. Brian immediately launched an investigation. Within days, he discovered Victoria's company was behind the article. When Emma learned this, she was both shocked and heartbroken. Why would she do this? She asked, voice breaking. Brian looked into her eyes. Because she can't stand someone taking my side, but Emma, trust me. The truth will protect you. Emma fell silent. Even if Brian believed her, she knew a single scandal could destroy a budding career in fashion. Instead of giving up, Emma fought back. She sent her entire sketchbook to the organizers of the previous showcase, along with a detailed work journal, documenting her process over months. The evidence clearly showed she'd created her collection long before the accusations. A week later, the organizers issued a statement clearing Emma's name, declaring the allegations false. The press reversed course with headlines proclaiming, "Young designer overcomes storm." Public opinion shifted. Many expressed admiration for her resilience. Emma sat by her window that evening, gazing at the distant city lights. A message from Brian appeared. "You did it. You proved yourself without my help. I've never been prouder." Emma smiled softly, a wave of relief and strength washing over her. The storm had passed, but she knew it was only the beginning. More challenges awaited in a world of power, wealth, and envy. But Emma also knew the fire in her heart was lit. This time, it wouldn't be easily extinguished. She opened a fresh page in her sketchbook, beginning her following collection. Her strokes were bold, confident, no longer trembling as they once did. Emma whispered, "I'll show them if they want to test me. I'm not just the name beside Brian Greene. I'm me." After clearing her name, Emma Ramirez earned newfound respect. Collaboration offers poured in from local fashion brands to small European showcases. Emails flooded her inbox. Her phone buzzed constantly, leaving her both exhilarated and overwhelmed. While reviewing contracts with Maria and Jake one evening, Emma leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples wearily. "I didn't expect things to move this fast." Maria laughed heartily. "You fought for this day. Be proud and embrace it." Jake was more cautious. "But you need to be selective, Em. Not every offer is right." Emma nodded, but deep down, she knew the real challenges were beginning. Meanwhile, Brian was swamped with international deals, frequently flying to London and Tokyo, sometimes gone for weeks. When they managed to meet, both were drained by overlapping schedules. Emma set a stack of documents on the table on a rare evening together. "I've been invited to Paris Fashion Week. It's an opportunity I can't pass up." Brian smiled, his eyes gleaming with pride. "I knew you were meant for this," but his voice softened. "It'll last at least a month. And during that time, I'll be negotiating in Asia. We won't see each other." Emma went still. In the quiet room, only the clock ticking filled the silence. The following days, Emma was consumed with preparations for Paris sketches, meetings, material lists. She barely ate or slept. Brian called every night, but their conversations grew shorter. "You're busy," Emma said, breathless, when he checked in. "I know, but I miss you." "I miss you too." but we both have our work." After hanging up, Emma leaned against the wall, feeling an indescribable void. One day, a European brand sent a long-term collaboration offer requiring her to relocate to Paris permanently. After reading the crisp printed words, Emma's heart raced with excitement and dread. Maria cheered. "This is a game changer. You have to seize it." Jake looked at her, his voice low. "But that means living in Paris. What about Brian?" Emma fell silent. This decision would test not just her career, but her love. That evening, Brian visited fresh off an extended business trip, looking weary, but forcing a smile. Emma handed him the offer letter. He read it carefully, then set it down. "This is a golden opportunity. You have to go." Emma blinked, surprised. "You mean that?" Brian nodded. "I love you not to hold you back, but to see you shine." "But," his eyes darkened, "I'm afraid distance will wear us down." Emma stepped closer, gripping his hand tightly. "Distance is only scary if one of us stops believing." Brian squeezed her hand, but said nothing more. In his eyes, Emma saw something new, the fear of loss. The days that followed were a tug of war. Her sketches fueled her ambition, but thoughts of Brian tightened her heart. Maria noticed her turmoil and pulled her onto the balcony, speaking bluntly. "You're scared of losing Brian, aren't you?" Emma nodded slightly. "But if you give up this chance, you'll lose yourself, and sooner or later, you'll resent him for it." Maria's words cut deep, but woke Emma up. Late one night, Emma sat at her desk drafting an email. Her hands trembled as she typed, "I accept the invitation to Paris Fashion Week." She hit send, then leaned back, exhaling heavily. Her phone buzzed. A message from Brian. "Just landed. Meet tomorrow." Emma stared at the screen, tears streaming down. She knew tomorrow she'd have to tell him the truth. They met the next day at a small cafe, a place of past joyful chats. But today the air was heavy. Emma shared her decision. Brian was silent for a long time, then nodded. "I saw it coming." "Are you mad?" Emma's voice shook. "No, I'm just sad I won't see you as often. But I'm proud." Emma choked up. "I'm scared we'll drift apart." Brian took her hand, his gaze deep. "We won't if you believe. I'll fly to Paris whenever I can. And if you ever feel tired, call. I'll come." His words tethered Emma's heart, both comforting and bittersweet. That night back home, Emma looked in the mirror. Her tearful eyes sparkled with resolve. She knew the path to success was never easy, and love to endure required both to stand firm. She whispered, "Love or career? Maybe I'll choose both. But to keep them, I have to be stronger." The next morning, the press announced that Emma Ramirez had been officially invited to Paris Fashion Week. Praise flooded in, but skeptical comments lingered. "She's riding Brian Greene's fame. Let's see how long she lasts in Paris." Emma read them, then smiled faintly. The storms never stopped, but this time she wasn't trembling. Her phone buzzed. A message from Brian. "I booked a ticket to Paris. No one says I can't be your audience." Emma clutched the phone to her chest, tears falling, both painful and beautiful. The line between love and career was treacherous, but at least she wasn't walking it alone. Paris in autumn glowed with golden trees lining the Champs-Élysées. The crisp air buzzed with excitement as Fashion Week drew thousands of journalists, designers, investors, and celebrities from around the globe. Backstage, Emma clutched the fabric of her first model's dress, her heart pounding as loudly as the crowd's murmurs. This was no small showcase. It was an international stage. Her collection, Storm and Light, would debut in minutes, culminating months of grueling work and a childhood dream. Maria gripped her hand, her gaze steady. "You've come this far. Step out with all your confidence." Emma nodded. The stage lights flared, Music surged. The first model strode out in a dress inspired by rain, crystal beads shimmering like droplets on ashen fabric. The collection transitioned from dark to radiant hues, symbolizing the journey from storm to light. The audience fell silent, then erupted in applause. Journalists scribbled frantically, cameras flashed relentlessly. Emma, hidden backstage, teared up. Each design was a piece of her soul, now seen by the world. The room rose to its feet as the final model glided out in a white gown embroidered with silver. The applause roared like a storm. Emma stepped out to bow, her heart bursting. Amid the crowd, she caught Brian's eyes. Seated in the front row, his gaze never left her, quiet but brimming with pride. The show was a triumph. International collaboration is flooding in. A major conglomerate proposed a multi-year contract to build a brand under Emma Ramirez's name. In her hotel room, Emma spread the hefty contract before her. Jake's eyes sparkled. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance, Em. If you sign, you'll be among the top names." Maria nodded. "But it means staying in Paris for years." Emma gripped her pen, her heart heavy. Signing would launch her career to new heights, but it would test her love for Brian more fiercely than ever. That evening, Emma and Brian met by the Seine. A chilly breeze blew, and the Eiffel Tower's lights danced on the water. Brian wrapped a scarf around her neck gently. "I heard about the big offer." Emma nodded, her voice catching. "I don't know what to do. I'm scared signing means we'll lose each other forever." Brian was quiet for a long moment, then spoke. "I won't lie. I'm selfish. I want you close. But if I hold you back, I'd kill your dream, and our love wouldn't be whole anymore." Emma looked at him, eyes glistening. "What do you want me to choose?" Brian placed his hands on her shoulders. "I want you to choose yourself. Only when you live your passion can you love fully." Emma's tears spilled over. His words were both painful and liberating. The next day, Emma entered a meeting with the conglomerate's executives. All eyes were on her, awaiting her nod for a multi-million-dollar deal. She took a deep breath and spoke slowly. "I'm grateful for this opportunity, but I have conditions. The brand must keep my name, and I'll work between Paris and New York. I won't abandon my home or lose balance in my personal life." The room went silent. Whispers broke out. The director frowned. "That's a tough ask." Emma replied calmly, "I'll walk away if my dream means becoming someone else's puppet." Her resolve silenced the room. After tense deliberation, the director nodded. "Agreed. You'll have your terms." Emma signed. The pen glided across the paper, opening a new chapter. Stepping out of the building, she saw Brian waiting. His eyes held curiosity. "What did you do?" Emma smiled through tears. "I signed, but I set terms so I don't lose everything. I want my career, but I also wish to use it." Brian hugged her tight, whispering, "You proved more decisive than anyone I've ever met. I promise I'll walk beside you, Paris or New York." Fashion Week ended, but Emma's name soared. The press dubbed her a bold new star. Brands sought her out, and none dared underestimate her now. Emma sat by the window in her small Paris apartment, the city's lights twinkling. Brian, back from a business trip, brought 2 glasses of wine. He set one before her, saying softly, "We've weathered so many storms. Now let's start a new journey together." Emma clinked her glass with his eyes shining. "I don't know what the future holds, but with you I'm not afraid." Brian smiled, kissing her forehead. "And with you, I've found what truly matters." Outside Paris gleamed. 2 hearts found each other in the small room after months of trials. No choice was perfect, but Emma had chosen a path that kept her dream and her love. She knew challenges lay ahead, but she wasn't walking alone this time. And so Emma and Brian's story didn't end. It was only beginning.